His voice continues to echo over the centuries. The predictions he made are frighteningly accurate. And every few years, when a calamity of horrific proportions hits mankind, we turn to the words of the man who foresaw it all. Michel de Nostradamus, known to the world as Nostradamus. French professor, physician, family man, astrologer, mathematician, and brilliant scholar, Nostradamus was a Renaissance man. But it is his prophecies written down for the benefit of all mankind that rouse our minds and imagination more than 400 years after his death. With the assistance of John Hogue, best-selling author and the world's leading authority on Nostradamus, we will explore these prophecies, not only the ones that have come true, but also the ones that are in our present and in the direct path of our future. Did he predict the recent explosion of terrorism and havoc? Will there be a third world war, and has it already begun? Who is the third Antichrist, and what sort of evil will he do? Will there ever be world peace? What will become of our civilization in the upcoming centuries? Will mankind destroy the earth, or find a way to take care of it? These and many other predictions of Nostradamus are right in front of our eyes. The question remains, will we be able to see them, heed their warnings, and avoid their consequences as Nostradamus wished? He believed only if we stand idly by would his predictions come true.
Because one thing is certain, whether you're a skeptic debunking Nostradamus or whether you believe in Nostradamus, sometime in the debate you're going to talk about where are we going from here? What is our future? So with that said, there are enough prophecies of Nostradamus, about 200 or so, that are clearly naming names, dates, experiences that did happen, that prove that there's something more than mere quackery going on here.
He was born Michel de Nostradamus of Jewish parents who converted to Christianity in the early years of the Inquisition to avoid persecution. Young Michel was a bright boy who took an early interest in medicine and astrology. Moving to the university city of Montpellier, he studied medicine at the academy. After completing his medical education, Nostradamus was thrown into the battle against one of the deadliest diseases to ever scourge our planet, the bubonic plague. The plague was so devastating that it wiped out half of the population of Europe.
Nostradamus was born in 1503, and he died in 1566 at the age of 62. If he had not written a single prophecy, he would still go down in history as one of the great healers of the 16th century, because his main profession was as a doctor, and he had some of his greatest successes in medicine in curing whole cities of plague during the 1540s, the cities of Aix, Lyon, and Salon, where the latter being the place he finally resided and eventually wrote his prophecies in.
But Nostradamus' success was to be destroyed by a great personal tragedy. He could neither foresee nor control the devastating effect of the plague on his own family. The horrible disease flared up anew.
When he was living in Agen in southwestern France, he married into a wealthy family and had 2 children. And then one day the plague came into town, and the first people carried off by the plague was his wife and children. And understanding, though this is the High Renaissance period, there was a lot of superstition around. And a lot of people thought that he had made some pact with the devil. And that the more common people thought that. Many of his clients abandoned him.
His failure to save his own family gave rise to critics who accused him of delving into the occult. And voicing their fury, they charged Nostradamus with being a heretic. Racked by grief, Nostradamus left his home and spent several years aimlessly traveling throughout the Mediterranean area. At one stage during this period, he developed a deeper awareness of his self. He changed the spelling of his name to the Latin form and became Nostradamus. At the same time, he put more of his faith into the images he saw while meditating. Nostradamus finally settled in Salon de Provence in southern France, where he remarried and began a new family. After the birth of his son, he began to record his prophecies.
To my son Caesar Nostradamus, a long life and happiness. Your late arrival, my son Caesar Nostradamus, has made me write down what I have compiled in many nights of wakefulness. After my body has left this world, let what has been revealed to me by the essence of God in astronomic constellations be your legacy and of benefit to mankind. I was going to keep silent and desist from writing down what I have learned, but then I decided to spread the events, insofar as they are of general interest, and to present them in the form of coded and confusing sentences.
The 16th century was a time of superstition and persecution. The church, with its powerful influence over the state, struck out at individuals that were considered odd, unusual, or eccentric. Many people were tried, convicted, and sentenced to horrible tortures and even death for whatever did not fit into the church's vision of what was acceptable. It was a dangerous time for extraordinary minds, and Nostradamus was determined to protect his family from the persecution he had suffered earlier. While Nostradamus wrote down his visions, he did so in a manner that would not endanger himself or his new family.
And it takes a while to learn the language of Nostradamus. It's not enough to know French. You have to speak Nostradamian French, which is even his own people in his own time were saying, what? What are you saying? It is in code, but there's no all-encompassing code that unlocks all of it.
With the unquenchable curiosity of a scholar, Nostradamus delved into his vision quest with the help of prophets and mystics who came before him.
I was given several scripts which had been hidden for centuries. Aware of the threat they presented, I put them into the fire after reading them. While the flames devoured them and licked high into the air, there came about an unnatural brightness, clearer than natural light, similar to blinding lightning.
Nostradamus guards his magical secrets well, but at the same time he felt compelled to give us some hints and some leads to what kind of disciplines he was into to effect a meditative trance that would allow him to go beyond his little mind and contact what he calls divine media, messengers, angelic fire angel spirits, he used to call them. He obviously used the Keys of Solomon, which had been translated by Fucino into Latin, and he could have purchased a copy from Marseille, even though it was from the previous century. He also had a Latin copy of Mysteris Egyptorium.
It is believed that Nostradamus memorized these ancient scripts and the wisdom they contained, then burned them to destroy any evidence of their influence over his thinking. Before he finished his writings, Nostradamus completed several books, almanacs, and cosmetic recipes. But what continues to speak to us over the years are his prophecies. Divided into 10 sections he labeled centuries, Nostradamus wrote a total of 942 prophecies. He used a form known as a quatrain, which is simply a 4-line stanza, or 4 lines of verse.
I will not call myself a prophet, or claim to have such an effect. But when I receive revelations and inspirations, I, as a mortal man, am not further away from heaven with my senses than from the earth with my feet.
Students of Nostradamus' work are often confused by varying interpretations of the prophecies by modern scholars. Many believe the man purposely left some meanings at loose ends, a device to deflect criticism if a prophecy did not prove true.
One has to also understand, one has to think like Nostradamus. One has to see the world and the future from the mindset of a 16th century man.
Among the many prophets the modern world has seen, Nostradamus has stood apart from the crowd. He has delved further into the future than most others. And, in spite of claims by his critics that he was ambiguous, he often was very exacting, making definite references, even calling people by name. An example was his widely known prophecy for King Henry II. The Queen of France, Catherine de' Medici, who was a fan of Nostradamus, noticed a reference to her husband, the king, dying in a jousting accident. Henry, a skeptic, summoned the visionary to the Chateau de l'Empereur to question him about what he wrote.
The young lion will overcome the older one on the field of combat in single battle. He will pierce his eyes through a golden cage. 2 wounds made 1, then he dies a cruel death.
But Nostradamus' words fell on deaf ears. 2 years later, on the final day of a tournament, the skeptical king entered a jousting contest. Henry's opponent, a Scottish guard 9 years younger, wore a lion upon his shield, as did the king, who also sported a golden helmet.
They went for a couple passes without much happening. Finally, the king wanted a final pass at the count, and the count's jousting stick was too high. He collided into it. It split into huge splinters, and one went into his neck and through the gilded cage of his helmet, putting out his eye from behind. He died 10 days later of peritonitis of the brain.
The accuracy of Nostradamus' prediction established his reputation as a serious prophet. One of the first Nostradamus predictions to come true after his death was the Great Fire of London.
The blood of the just will be demanded at London, burnt by 20 bolts of lightning when the 6 appears 3 times. The ancient lady will fall from her high place, and many of the same sect will be killed.
In the second line, Nostradamus even predicts the exact year.
When the 6 appears 3 times.
The fire that destroyed most of London started on September 2nd, 1666. Fanned by wind, the fires spread with terrifying speed, feeding on the tar and pitch commonly used to seal houses. It raged out of control for 5 days and incinerated 80% of the city. In his prophecies, Nostradamus refers to many political and religious leaders in the future. He describes many of these men as violators of peace and Christianity.
Some of Nostradamus' most amazing prophecies deal with World War II and a man he calls Hister, which is a close approximation to his. There are 3 antichrists that he foresees. The first was called Napoleon, Napoleon King, and it was spelled in a Corsican fashion because Napoleon was a Corsican. Napoleoni, that's what he used to be called before he was King of France, Emperor of France. And then there is Hister, which a lot of skeptics say, oh, that's a river he's talking about, it's not a man. Of course, Nostradamus liked to use double entendre. It is the river's name, ancient name for the Danube in Latin. However, it is the same river where Adolf Hitler grew up. And if you read Hitler's life, you find many of his ideas, his evil ideas, were concocted daydreaming as a boy on the banks of the Hister. Hitler on the Hister. Classic double entendre.
Like John Hogue, many students of Nostradamus believe that he has referred to 3 antichrists among these men. The first is Napoleon, the second antichrist is Hitler, and the third is yet to come. Nostradamus first introduces Napoleon when he writes,
An emperor will be born near Italy. He will cost his empire very dearly. They will say that from the sort of people that surround him, that he is less a prince than a butcher.
Born on the island of Corsica off the shores of Italy, Napoleon rose quickly from soldier to become Emperor of France, his attire changing from a military uniform to an emperor's cape.
From simple soldier he will attain to empire. From the short robe he will attain to the long.
His disdain for priests and the church led him to systematically confiscate its property, bleeding it of its assets and power.
Brave in arms, the very worst towards the church, he will vex the priests as water does the sponge.
Nostradamus finished his prophecy by describing how Napoleon would end his years in exile.
The great empire will soon be exchanged for a little place, a very petty and tiny place for a country, in the middle of which he will come to lay down his scepter.
The great ruler Napoleon's life didn't end with a bang, but rather a whimper. Exiled to St. Helena, a small remote island in the South Atlantic Ocean, he was imprisoned there until his death in a farmhouse next to the sea. Another seminal event that Nostradamus predicted is the French Revolution. As a Frenchman, there is little doubt that his vision must have caused him considerable distress. With amazing clarity, he predicted events about which he could have no inkling. He foretold of the creation of the jury system and the downfall of the monarchy.
The realm taken, the king convicted, the queen sent to death by jurors chosen by lot.
The death of Marie Antoinette and the king's concubine Madame du Barry and other royals.
They will deny the queen's son, and the concubine shares the fate of the consort.
One of the most chilling images Nostradamus witnessed must have been of the yet-to-be-invented guillotine.
The mouth will swim with blood, headless idiots, bloody slicing.
Idiots without heads, indeed. During the Reign of Terror, the razor-sharp edge of the bloody new invention, the guillotine, managed to create over 17,000 of them. Another incident connected with the French Revolution concerns the corpse of Nostradamus himself. In 1793, the revolution was in full swing, and it was common for the National Guardsmen to destroy churches and dig up tombs and loot graves. In Salon de Provence, a group of guardsmen were discovered by the city fathers in the churchyard. The guardsmen, along with some peasants, had broken into the tomb of Nostradamus. There was a drunken revelry going on, and they were tossing his bones back and forth amongst themselves.
It apparently happened that some of the peasants of the town had goaded one of the National Guardsmen that if you were to drink your wine, not out of your goblet, but out of the goblet of Nostradamus's skull, you might get his powers, but beware, you will probably also die suddenly. Well, he took the dare and apparently was caught drinking in the skull when soldiers came in and arrested them. The bones were collected as best they could. And it is said and documented that he was hung the following day for vandalism.
Out of the deepest part of the Western Europe, from poor people a child shall be born, who with his tongue shall seduce many people.
Nostradamus' second Antichrist marched in behind the jackboots of a ruthless army. He was born in Braunau am Inn, Austria-Hungary in 1889, the fourth child of Clara and Alois Hitler, a simple customs service worker.
The great, shameless, audacious crier will be elected governor of the army.
Hitler's rise to power in the Nazi Party was largely aided by his rabid and unrestrained vocal delivery of extreme nationalistic speeches and anti-Semitic rhetoric.
Neurosis, charlatanism, bombast, anti-socialism, hate to the Jews, treachery, murder, race insanity. I am the leader of the German people.
A captain of Germany shall come to yield himself by forced help to the King of Kings with the help of Hungary, so that his revolt shall cause great bloodshed. They shall pursue crosses of iron topsy-turvy. Under the refrained shadow of freeing people from slavery, he will usurp the people and the city for himself. He shall do worse by the deceit of a young whore, for he shall be betrayed in the field, reading a false poem.
Hungary was one of the first countries to fall passively in line behind Hitler's quest for power, helping the Third Reich in expanding its borders. The emblem of his nationalistic revolt was the swastika, a cross with its ends turned topsy-turvy, the Antichrist symbol, lost on no one. In his quatrains about this period in time, Nostradamus accurately describes Hitler and the Third Reich. Nostradamus wrote, "Liberty will not be regained. It will be occupied by a proud, black, villainous, and unjust man." It seems clear that this reference is to Hitler and his stance opposing religion.
The third one does firstly worse than Nero. Vacant and valiant, how much human blood flows. He will cause the furnace to be rebuilt. Brothers and sisters are captive in diverse places. Unpleasant to see the marks on chin, forehead, and nose. The bloody victor makes harangues throughout the conflict, roasting the tongue and the flesh and the bones.
Nero was, of course, the bloodthirsty Roman dictator whose debauchery was eclipsed by Hitler. The furnace to be rebuilt is a direct reference to the massive gas crematoriums to be built at Auschwitz, Dachau, and Buchenwald, and other death camps to incinerate the bodies of millions of Jews, socialists, gypsies, Slavs, homosexuals, and the mentally ill. Here is another example of how a prophecy only becomes clear after the event. Nostradamus himself may not have been sure of what he was seeing. In 1560, it would be difficult to imagine that one day man would fly and wear an oxygen mask. Therefore, he describes the vision as half hog, half man.
When they see the half-pig man, noise, chants, battle scene fought in the sky, and the brute beasts will be heard to speak.
Imagine if you were a 16th century man trying to see a jet pilot in a mask. He looks like a pig. And he chants. Imagine if you were a man in the 16th century trying to understand the short speak of fighter pilots. A162523 25412 would sound like a chant. So the noise, the thunder of the jet, the chants of the pegmen inside them, battle scene fought in the sky. The brute beast, the pigmen, will be heard talking. Heard, as if in the airwaves, the radios. It must have been quite a thing for him to see that.
Nostradamus also foretold the use of incendiary bombs, writing that living fire globes will descend upon the city and light it up so that it could be destroyed.
By night, the city will be reduced to dust by the fleet. The city on fire, helpful to the enemy.
The firestorms of London became guideposts for the night attacks of the fleets of the German Air Force, the Luftwaffe, in their attempt to pulverize the British Isles. There were few aspects of war that Nostradamus did not foretell. He saw the use of ships and amphibious craft, as well as airplanes and bombing. The D-Day landings were a graphic example of his oracles.
When the fish that is both terrestrial and aquatic, by a strong wave shall be cast upon the shore.
Nostradamus' visions of war were far from ended with his prophecies about war in Europe.
Near the harbors within two cities there will happen two scourges, never before seen. Famine, pestilence within, people put out by the sword. Cries for help to the great immortal God.
In an attempt to bring a speedier end to World War II, and saved the lives of thousands of its soldiers, the United States dropped atomic bombs on the two Japanese cities of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Up to 200,000 people died, and the radiation poisoning left a plague that ravaged the insides of tens of thousands of individuals.
He will come to take himself to the corner of the moon, where he will be taken and placed on alien land.
Some 400 years before Neil Armstrong took one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind, Nostradamus saw man in space, on the moon's lunar surface, a strange, near weightless desert.
I, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, do solemnly swear
that you will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
that I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
In his time, John F. Kennedy was one of the most popular political figures in the world.
Ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country.
But his tenure as president would be cut short by a tragedy predicted 400 years earlier.
The great man will be struck down in the day by a thunderbolt, the evil deed predicted by the bearer of a petition. According to the prediction, another falls at nighttime.
With this prophecy, Nostradamus predicted the assassinations of John and Robert Kennedy. In the 37th quatrain of the 6th century, Nostradamus wrote a detailed description of the disputes that would arise over who was guilty of John F. Kennedy's murder.
The ancient work will be accomplished, and from the roof evil ruin will fall on the great man. Being dead, they will accuse an innocent of the deed. The guilty one is hidden in the misty thicket.
Lee Harvey Oswald was arrested for the murder. His sniper's lair was discovered near the roof of the Texas School Book Depository in Dallas. He protested his innocence, but was himself murdered before he could be brought to trial. In light of newer evidence, some believe that Oswald did not fire the fatal shot. In many people's eyes, this controversy has yet to be resolved.
Being dead, they will accuse an innocent of the deed.
It is claimed that Oswald shot Kennedy in the back from the 6th story of this building. But a second bullet, the fatal shot, came from the front, as can be seen in this 8mm film. The only spot from which this second shot could have come became known as the grassy knoll. Some believe that this film shows the outline of a man and a rifle, marked by the arrow, concealed in the woody area.
The guilty one is hidden in the misty thicket.
Many debates still rage over the official reports of the president's assassination. But one thing is certain: Nostradamus had a remarkable vision of what happened. The second part of the quatrain came true the night of June 5th, 1968, with the assassination of Robert Kennedy.
According to the prediction, another falls at nighttime.
In his quatrains, Nostradamus refers to three brothers. What of the third? In this case, Edward Kennedy.
by the detractors slander against the younger born.
Senator Edward Kennedy was accused of causing the death of Mary Jo Kopechne by drowning in July 1969. This scandal would slander his reputation, changing the course of how the public perceived him and his political future. As Nostradamus said, "The youngest shall be slandered." The Roman Catholic Church and the popes are often referred to in Nostradamus' writings, and there seems to be no doubt that he was a devout follower. However, there is another point of view that maintains that he was only masquerading as a Catholic to avoid the religious persecution to which his Jewish heritage would have subjected him. The truth of this matter will never be known, but he did make many prophecies about the Catholic Church, some of which were dark. The College of Cardinals elects the Pope in the Roman Catholic Church, who, in turn, serves until his death. John Paul I had by far the shortest reign in the history of the Church, a mere 3 weeks.
When the great Roman's tomb is found, the day after a pope shall be elected. The Senate will not approve of him. His blood is poisoned in the sacred chalice.
St. Peter's tomb was consecrated during the reign of Paul VI. When he died, John Paul I was elected Pope.
The head of the world's most powerful church, new to his office, has turned out to be quite a different man from what his electors imagined.
He has shown himself to be conservative, staunchly and outspokenly anti-communist, and seems prepared to impose much more discipline on his clergy.
One night he met with several cardinals, dined with 2 others, and saw 2 more before retiring for the night. The following morning, he was found dead in his bed.
The brief official announcement says he died of a heart attack. As far as anyone knows, he had been in perfect health.
There is no autopsy. Church rules imply that there should not be. And the city's 2 most prominent embalmers are quickly whisked by limousine to the bedside to perform their task, obliterating forever the cause of death and leaving the question of who done it buried in the Byzantine workings of the church.
He who will have government of the Great Cape will be led to execute in certain cases. The 12 red ones will spoil the cover. Under murder, murder will be perpetrated.
Did Nostradamus predict the murder of Pope John Paul I? We may never know the definitive answer to this controversial question. Nostradamus did not limit his prophecies to calamities involving man against man. He also warned of natural disasters induced by man that could cause as much ruin as any war. The destruction of the rainforest, and environmental pollution.
Before the invasion, the heavens will show signs. In the year when Saturn and Mars are equally fiery, the air is very dry, a long comet.
The holes in the ozone layer and the melting of the polar ice caps.
From hidden fires a great place burns with heat, little rain, hot wind, wars and raids.
Fires and drought will ravage the earth.
A horrible undoing of people and animals, blood, thirst, famine, when the comet shall pass.
The earth will be ruined by tornadoes, hurricanes, and floods.
There will be a great earthquake. The great theater full up will be ruined.
Volcanic explosions and great famine.
The great famine which I sense approaching will often turn up in various places, then become universal. It will be so vast and long-lasting that people will grab roots from the trees and children from the breast.
Terrible prophecies that warn against man's careless abuse of our planet.
Nostradamus is unique in history because he has an afterlife. And his afterlife is the myth or the legacy that he created through his own prophecies. They are just obscure enough to make one doubt whether they exist or are true, but every once in a while the prophecies uncloud themselves when events transpire. And the names, dates, and instances are there that must be accepted as true if you have an open mind.
At dawn on Friday, February 26, 1993, a rented yellow van crossed the George Washington Bridge from New Jersey into New York City. Carrying a 1,200-pound bomb, its route would take it directly to the World Trade Center. The time was just minutes before 9 a.m., the beginning of the business day. 400 years before, Nostradamus had written,
Earth-shaking fire from the center of the earth will cause the towers around the new city to shake. Two great rocks for a long time will make war.
The van driver parked in the underground garage beneath the towers and lit 4 20-foot fuses. 12 minutes later, the World Trade Center was rocked by a huge explosion. It soon became clear that what was initially believed to be an exploding boiler was in reality a terrorist attack, the first known to have occurred on American soil. If the terrorist linked to Osama bin Laden had succeeded, the bomb tower would have collapsed into the second tower and brought both down to the ground. Instead, the blast only tore through several floors of the underground garage. The plan for mass destruction had failed, but 6 people were killed and more than 1,000 were injured. And this was only the beginning.
The new city, Hollow Mountains. If you ever have seen New York City from a distance, from air, from the shores of New Jersey, you might see it as a great mountain range of man-made hollow mountains if you were from the 16th century, when nothing was higher than a cathedral spire. Not 110 stories like the Everests of New York, the World Trade Center buildings.
The magnificent World Trade Center, 2 towers, each with 110 stories, a place where 50,000 people worked, and a major tourist attraction where 70,000 visitors pass through the doors every day. From this one location, there were connections around the world, connections that help fuel the global economy, foster peaceful trade among nations, and serve as a true bastion of capitalism. 400 years before, in Quatrain 49 of his Century 10, Nostradamus wrote,
Garden of the world near the new city, in the path of the hollow mountains it will be seized and plunged into the cauldron by force, the waters poisoned by sulfur.
By the Garden of the World, did Nostradamus mean New Jersey, known as the Garden State? And is the new city New York? Are the Hollow Mountains the twin towers of the World Trade Center?
At 45 degrees, the sky will burn. Fire approaches the great new city. Immediately, a huge scattered fire leaps up.
The flight path of the hijacked airplane as it crashes into the World Trade Center is at a 45-degree angle, the same vantage point of Nostradamus' vision, and the sky itself appears to be on fire.
There was a liquidity about the clouds as they went down. I believe that this is Nostradamus speaking as the poet, trying to understand sights that are very hard for him to conceive of future events, of a great hollow mountain, the World Trade Centers, collapsing into the cauldron of their own debris.
The rubble is piled 60 or 70 feet high in some places. Beneath it, all that will be left of the Twin Towers is a huge black pit. Thousands of innocent men, women, and children lost their lives.
The final line, drinking by force the waters poisoned by sulfur, is another attempt of Nostradamus, in my opinion, to be poetic, to describe these liquid-like clouds of the great World Trade Center buildings collapsing into their own great, huge, almost volcanic-looking cloud debris, which in turn dusted much of New York City like a volcano with the poison of asbestos.
There is much evidence to support the fact that Nostradamus predicted this man-made disaster nearly 450 years ago. During the same period, he also warned of the three Antichrists. Napoleon Bonaparte was number one. Adolf Hitler was number two. Is this terrible tragedy the work of Antichrist number 3? For nearly 2 decades, the United States has been subject to terrorist attacks against its people and its property. Most of these assaults have occurred in Africa and the Middle East. Most of these crimes have been attributed to Osama bin Laden, a Middle Eastern billionaire with a savage hatred of all things American. He has organized a network of murderers known as Al-Qaeda to execute his ruthless vendetta against the West. Operating behind a false mask of religion, these madmen will go to any length to gain their goal. They consider suicide in kamikaze-like attacks to be an honor. Their supposed holy war, which is actually against the doctrines of Islam, is known as a jihad. On October 23, 1983, a truck full of explosives was driven into the Marine Barracks compound in Beirut, Lebanon. The resulting blast killed 241 U.S. servicemen and women. The Khobar Towers in Bahrain, Saudi Arabia was bombed on June 25, 1996. 25 Americans died. The bombing of the U.S. Embassy in Nairobi on August 7, 1998 killed more than 200. A few moments later, a bomb exploded outside the American Embassy in Tanzania. 11 people died and 85 were injured. And a suicide boat full of explosives rammed the U.S. destroyer Cole while berthed in the Yemenite port of Aden on October 12, 2000. The death toll there was 17 dead, with 39 wounded. If these acts are a prelude to the Third World War, which Nostradamus predicts will last over 27 years, is bin Laden truly the third Antichrist, or is he merely someone's puppet? Given the accuracy of Nostradamus' prophecies over the centuries, we are left with a yearning to know what's next. What lies ahead for us as individuals, nations, and mankind as a whole? Are there guideposts hidden in Nostradamus' quatrains that, if heeded now, will drastically change our lives and those of future generations?
Nostradamus spoke of three antichrists. One was Napoleon, Napoleon. The other was Hitler. A third is called Mabus, M-A-B-U-S. It seems from all indications in his prophecies that he believed the third Antichrist would be coming from either North Africa or the Near East. I have always stated for the last 15 years my belief that the third Antichrist is either some minor terrorist with a lot of mass destructive force who takes the world by hostage, or is a leader of a rogue nation that harbors terrorists that do this.
This union of nations may be the very action Nostradamus suggests.
If my interpretation of these matters are on track, then I believe we are maybe months, maybe a year away from knowing who Nostradamus' third Antichrist is, because of some basic hints that he gives. He says, Mabus will soon be annihilated. He will soon fall. This will create a horrible undoing of people and animals. If Mabus is a Near East terrorist, and Mabus, the M-A-B-U-S, this code word for the man's name, is a classic example of a reverse Nostradamian anagram for Saddam. In the rules of anagrams, you can also drop two letters on the end of the word and not replace them. Drop M, drop S, Abu. This is the Arabic word for father. Abu Abbas, Abu Nidal, Abu Ammar, which is the code name, PLO code name for one we know as Yasser Arafat. All of these link into the wordplay. I'm not saying that's what it means, but they link better than anything outside of that region. Also, Osama bin Laden. The Western press do not phonetically properly spell his name. They say Osama. It is Usama. U-S-A-M-A. M-A-U-S. The law of anagram, you can replace the one extra A with a B. Mabus. So, it could be Osama bin Laden. I still contend that he is a front man for the real power behind this, and I still contend that it is Saddam Hussein. But we will see. If we start the countdown from the World Trade Center bombings, if that's what that means, and I'm not sure it is, then we're within 3 to 13 years of the danger of the friendship undermining between Russia, the European Union, and America, the brothers, NATO and Russia, the brothers of the North, the kings of the North. And it says in those Kings of the North prophecies that they nearly wipe out a triumvirate of nations that use ambush and subterfuge in their war. It's his way of talking about the modern word terrorism. So there, at least in my mind, which could be biased from my times, I am seeing this to say there are three nations that in a counterattack could be devastated beyond imagination by these great brothers of the North. Terrifies the Eastern kings, the Near Eastern kings, but the war isn't over just because of this hit for hit, that this sort of going in like Rambo and taking care of Osama bin Laden may actually trigger a 27-year war that need not happen. So we are probably entering a period with the violence of the attacks on New York Trade Center buildings, the possibility that the third Antichrist will very soon be annihilated, but a new leader and a new understanding of the problems in the Near East has to come from this country. And
if it doesn't, then that terrible prophecy of Quatrain 77, Century 8, about a bloody 27-year war with the earth covered in a red, icy hail will take place.
In the end, it is up to us. Our own actions and behavior will determine our future, whether dark or peaceful. We have a historical opportunity to prevent a horrific and lengthy war and stop the calamities that may ensue. If we act in a responsible manner, we can bring about an age of peace for our planet and its people.
After this war shall have lasted a good while, there shall be a new reign of Saturn in a golden age. God the Creator shall say, hearing the afflictions of the people, Satan shall be put and tied in the bottom of the deep, and there shall begin an age of universal peace.